I'm going to focus on Trent Alexander-Arnold, actually, on today's pod. I mean, if I was Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool, I'd be absolutely delighted at this, Adam. First of all, God, opportunity to give him 2 weeks off but not have to play against Albania. Brilliant.
Yeah, and I think that is, even those people, those who are close to Alexander-Arnold, who may be hurt by this decision, recognise that there may be a long-term win for everyone from this situation. Have a couple of weeks off, get yourself back to your best. Go again for the last few games of the season, go to the Euros and be a bit fresher. I do think it's a bizarre decision. I think I'm right in saying Alexander-Arnold wasn't involved either in, was it the October or November internationals? I think he was injured for one set of those. So the thing I find strange is, even if Southgate, he could have called Alexander-Arnold up and only played him for one of the 3 games, for example, or none of the 3 games if he didn't want to. But I find it strange that we're talking here, I think, about probably England's most talented young player. And why wouldn't Gareth Southgate want to train with him for 10 days? We get so little time with these players over the course of the past year. Only one more training camp ahead of the Euros. Why would you not want to use that time, even if you don't want to play him competitively, to give him a bit of a rest in these games? Why wouldn't you want him involved in the shape, involved in set pieces, involved in understanding what it is that you want to do with England? That's what I find bizarre. I think, to give some context this season, we did a big piece on Liverpool last week, and during the conversations for that, I think Liverpool's centre-back situation has had ramifications for all different parts of the team. But the plan at the start of the season was to give Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andrew Robertson far more rest than what they've actually been able to give them. The plan was to actually give Nico Williams a bit more game time, to give Tsimikas, the new left back, more game time as well. But because of the constantly changing personnel, both in goal and at centre back, Klopp has felt that he wanted to provide consistency where players were fit, when Alexander-Arnold was fit, to consistently play Alexander-Arnold and Robertson. So I think it's led to them overplaying and therefore giving the perception of being out of form when, Alexander-Arnold, he's not been as good as he's been the last couple of seasons, but he's not had a disastrous season. He's had some poor games in a team that's malfunctioned. I'm surprised by this dropping. And it was described to me within 5 minutes of it happening as an old-fashioned axing. And I think that's what it's felt like a little bit. And I just think it's a real missed opportunity. But I mean, I suppose from Southgate's point of view, it's whether he wants to play with a back 4, whether he wants to play with a back 5. Clearly, I think he sees Kyle Walker as someone who can do both jobs. So he automatically probably stays in that squad for now. He loves Kieran Trippier. I have no idea why, but he does. He's got the right wing back, left wing back. He was captain for him a few months ago. I think there's probably the impact of the 2018 World Cup still lingers in Southgate's mind in that sense. So I think Trent has always been behind those two in Southgate's mind. And it's now a case of, well, what do you want to do with him? Maybe Jack, you've got an idea of where Southgate sees him, if at all, in the Euros.
Well, Southgate did say, maybe he will be in the squad for the Euros. But the more I think about it, the more I think, I don't think he will be. I think it just wouldn't make any sense to not pick him if you were going to pick him for the Euros. This is the last meetup. This is the last meetup before the end of the season. This is the time to really finesse and fine-tune the team in preparation for the start of the Euros, which is only, they'll have these 3 games, and I imagine then there'll be 2 friendlies lined up. I think it's Romania and Hungary, or Romania and Austria, in June before the tournament. Now is the time to get your team gelling. And so the idea that you could not pick him because he's playing badly, but then maybe he'll come back in June just doesn't really seem plausible to me. Look, of course, anything can happen. Maybe Reece James will get injured. Maybe Trippier will get injured, and then Alexander-Arnold would come back in. But my assumption right now is that Alexander-Arnold will not be in the squad. And I agree with Adam. I think it's mad. It's like when England didn't take Ben Stokes to 2015 Cricket World Cup because he wasn't playing very well. Like in a sense, it doesn't matter. Like when you've got a best of a generation young talent, you take them to the World Cup, regardless of whether or not they happen to be in form. So I do think it is very strange, even though I totally accept that he's not playing very well, and I accept that he hasn't played that well for England.
But that is an interesting point, though, isn't it, Jack? Because I mean, you mentioned the cricket there, but we could throw the rugby union in at the moment, where Eddie Jones is being pilloried for picking players on reputation rather than on form. And for years with England, I suppose we've criticised, going back to the football, we've criticised a lack of strength in depth, maybe, or competition for places. And now there is genuine competition for places. And if somebody who is perceived to be the best isn't in form, form in inverted commas, then what do you do? I mean, there are arguments pro and against, aren't there?
There are. What I would say in defence of Alexander-Arnold on that point is that there's a difference between, say, picking a 33-year-old on reputation because they used to be good. Like we all, there's certainly been England players who played too long, I think, for the England team, like Wayne Rooney being one example. And then picking a brilliant young player who happens to not be playing well right now, but who on any decent guess will be England's right back for the next 10 years, unless he moves into a different position. So I think it's fairer to pick a young player who's out of form.
I think also there is a positional thing going on here, isn't there? That Southgate wants his fullback or his wing back to be far more, I suppose, on the outside than what Trent has been for Liverpool. And he's probably not adapted to that maybe as effectively as he could have done. But then I just sort of think, well, you've got such a talented player here. Surely, you're a good coach. Get it right, work with him. Get it right. Is it not a huge coaching limitation that we can have a player as talented as Alexander-Arnold and actually just basically conclude we can't get anything out of him?
I know, yeah, which is all the more reason to pick him for these. All the more reason to, if you were going to take him to the Euros, you would pick him now to work with him, to try and iron out some of that more tactical stuff. And it's true that he hasn't played especially well for England since he come into the team, since he made his debut just before the 2018 World Cup. But he's not old. There's plenty of time left to work with him to get the best out of him, I think. And that's basically why, like you, I find it so hard to get my head around. And
who's in goal?
I think I'm the only. He's injured at the moment. I think I'm the only Jordan Pickford fan left in the country. I think I think he's good.
I think you're joined by Gareth Southgate on that, because he's the ultimate loyalist to Jordan Pickford, and that's another example of with Southgate. There seems to be this debate raging about form versus reputation. I wonder if it's just trust more in Southgate's mind. He really trusts Jordan Pickford. He really trusts Kieran Trippier. And Adam touched upon the specific role. Clearly, we're not privy to Southgate's exact thinking, but given that Kieran Trippier spent months out of action because of his betting-related ban and has only played a couple of matches or a few matches since returning with Atletico Madrid. However, he has been competing at the top of La Liga and in the Champions League. And it's been described to me that nobody would run through brick walls to play for England more than Kieran Trippier. So there has been a lot of loyalty built up there. Similar with Pickford, similar with the centre-backs, because there's been, from people I've spoken to, they do not understand why, say, Eric Dyer and maybe even Tyrone Mings are in there ahead of somebody like Michael Keane, Ben Godfrey, Ezri Konsa, if you are picking on form. So I don't think it is a form versus reputation thing with Southgate. I think it's a trust.